Hello and welcome to Holiday Air 86. The crowds have come out in force to Biggin Hill here in Kent to see some of the most skillful pilots in the world flying a wide variety of aircraft, both old and new. This year, it's the 50th anniversary of the Spitfire, but it's also the 21st anniversary of the world-famous Red Arrows aerobatics team, and they'll be flying too, led by squadron leader Richard Thomas.
And another gorgeous aeroplane, as flown by the renowned Red Baron, this historic scourge of the skies, the Fokker triplane.
The old Harvard trainer is out in force in a formation team which is run entirely by part-time enthusiasts.
The Hungarian national aerobatic team Aero Triga flying their Zlin 50s with quite exceptional precision at very low altitude and extremely close together.
And of course all the noise and excitement of the fast jets, including a representation from the United States Air Force.
The name Biggin Hill is synonymous with the Spitfire, and how evocative it is to hear the throaty roar of all those Merlin engines back here again. That lucky chap, Chris Searle, is doing what all of us must envy. He's got himself a ride in the back seat of a Mark 9.
Well, John, I know just how you feel. This really is the flying experience of a lifetime. I'm flying in a two-seater Spitfire Mark 9. The Spitfires and Hurricanes, of course, which were so incredibly successful in the Battle of Britain in 1940. This aircraft is being flown by Nick Grace, the owner, and he tells me he assembled it from bits that came to him in tea chests. Well, this year is the 50th anniversary of the great Spitfire, and it'll be well celebrated and well represented here at Biggin Hill, obviously. Spitfire Society will be here, and we'll be talking to them, and we'll be seeing a fly past of some of the surviving Spitfires. Nick has very kindly agreed to put us through some of the manoeuvres which the flying aces of World War II must have done as a matter of routine. I'm holding on to my stomach. Okay, Nick, go ahead. And we're pulling up, and here we go.
A sight that will bring a lump to the throats of all the enthusiasts here. A combination of the old and the new, with Concorde flown by Captain Roger Dixon, escorted by two Spitfires with Pete Jarvis and John Allison aboard.
This unique formation is flying past at around 250 miles an hour, and it's an indication of the great gulf between the ages of the two designs, that while the Spitfires are flying just about as fast as their owners like them to be flown, Concorde, flying nose well up, is flying just about as slowly as it's safe to do. Concorde was the result of a tie-up between the British and the French. This is another collaboration, a multinational aircraft, the Tornado. Full power and full reheat on both engines as squadron leader Pete Chandler takes his aircraft up into the beginning of his display. Panavia Tornado is built jointly by British Aerospace, MBB of Germany, and Air Italia of Italy. "933 of these aircraft have been ordered, and over 400 are now in service with the three governments concerned. Squadron leader Pete Chandler flies with 455 Squadron, the Tornado Weapons Conversion Unit at Honington. His navigator in the back seat is Flight Lieutenant Nigel Nichols. You can see very clearly the swing-wing variable geometry as he moves the aircraft now into its high-speed configuration.
One of the main roles of the Tornado GR1 is to fly at transonic speeds at very low level, enabling it to duck under the radar defenses. This is all done automatically by a terrain-following radar and navigation system coupled up to Tornado's autopilot. At the moment, it's cleared to 250 feet. In reality, it would fly a lot lower. The air defense variant, the Tornado F2. The most obvious difference is the longer nose to accommodate the GEC Foxhunter radar. It has the capability to stooge around hundreds of miles from base, carry out an interception, and return home, all without refueling. Another swing-wing aeroplane, this time American, the F-111. Interesting to note the different philosophy with the navigator sitting beside the pilot rather than behind him, as in the Tornado.
You can see the swing wings fully forward there, John, but what is the point of a swing wing on an aircraft?
Well, it was a design really to achieve the best of both worlds. The fully swept back position gave the airplane desirable high-speed characteristics. In the fully swept forward position, you get excellent low-speed handling characteristics, enabling the airplane to land on very short runways.
You only ever see it on military aircraft. Why has that design not been adapted for passenger-carrying aircraft?
Well, if you can imagine it, the bearing on which the wings pivot and the mechanism to drive it is pretty heavy and bulky, and if you scaled it up to the size of a civil airliner, you'd probably end up in a situation where you wouldn't be able to take any passengers at all. This F-111 is from the 20th Tactical Fighter Wing at Upper Hayford, and the airplane is capable of carrying a formidable array of weaponry with very sophisticated laser guidance systems.
The distinctive roar of a radial engine, the Pratt & Whitney Wasp to be exact. It powers the Harvards of the Harvard formation team. I'm in the lead aircraft piloted by Anthony Hutton. Now, thousands of pilots learnt to fly from scratch on Harvard trainers, including a passenger in a neighbouring aircraft. For Concorde captain John Hutchinson, the Harvard was the first aircraft he ever flew as a pilot.
Yes, Chris, that's absolutely right, but I must admit that this is an airplane that frightened the life out of me to begin with. In fact, it took me about 40 hours or so before I began to start feeling at home with her. The reason, of course, being that the Harvard is quite an unforgiving aeroplane. If you don't handle her properly, she'll bite your head off. But in fact, that's a magnificent characteristic in any training aircraft, because it teaches you a respect for aviation and aeroplanes that will stand you in good stead throughout your flying career.
The Harvard formation team have been flying together since 1983. All the pilots in the team are part-time enthusiasts. The leader, Anthony Hutton, is a property consultant, and the other pilots are a Royal Navy helicopter instructor, Norman Lees, an RAF Hawk pilot, Pete John, and an electronics engineer, Ewan English. Now, every year for the last 4 seasons, they've been adding a few more maneuvers to their display. Now, this is my first ever experience of formation flying in the cockpit, and watching the other aircraft keeping station just a few feet away in what are quite gusty conditions fills me with admiration for the flying skills of the people involved. They have to concentrate extremely hard, and there are lots and lots of little tiny inputs of the controls to keep accurately on station. And that is a very distinctive sound, that radial engine, John. Why is it so different?
Well, it's a direct drive from the engine to the propeller. That causes a very high tip speed on the prop, and that leads to the distinctive rasping sound that we're hearing.
One slightly uncomfortable surprise, nobody's bothered to mention to me that there's display smoke in this formation, and quite a lot of it came up into the cockpit for a moment. I'm firmly convinced that the aircraft's on fire. Not true, I'm glad to say. No such worries for Brian Lecombe in his pit special. His solo display uses plenty of smoke, and in a stunt like the torque roll, he even flies backwards into it. Brian is a former world aerobatics champion, and even he admits to feeling a little bit queasy during the first few flights of the display season. It's not hard to see why.
all that sound and fury, something far from aerobatic, a rather more sedate form of transport, reminiscent of days gone by.
Well, this is nostalgia indeed, but nostalgia brought bang up to date with the very latest in modern materials. The gondola, where we're standing now, is made of Kevlar, and the envelope above our heads is made of polyester. This is the airship industry's Skyship 500, and we're on our way to London, that way. And the last time fare-paying passengers flew over London in an airship was as long ago as 49 years ago. It makes you wonder why they ever stopped. Well, the reason is simple. In those days, they derived their lift from explosive hydrogen, and there was, in the 30s, a whole succession of disasters. Now, we're lifted by inert helium, which is a very great deal safer. The power of this aircraft comes from two Porsche engines, which are basically the same as the engines which drive the Porsche 911 sports car. The ride is a bit like a cross between a rather wallowy boat and a very slow light aircraft, but you ought to see the rate of climb. It's pretty spectacular.
And yet another way to travel around the skies, standing on the wing of a tiger moth.
The brave wing walker in question is someone whose name appears on the end credits of this program, Anne McDougall. Her instructions are, if she wants to wave, and she's very happy to do so, she should do so by sticking her hands out in front of her, because the warning is that if she waves above her head or to the side, even at 55 knots, it's a very slight risk that her arms might get pulled out of their sockets. Anyway, there she goes, wing walking. Brave girl.
The Blackburn Buccaneer first flew in 1958 and crewed today by Flight Lieutenants Tony Burtonshaw and Clive Lambourne. This aircraft comes from 208 Squadron based at RAF Lossiemouth.
A Buccaneer was built to survive endless heavy landings on the heaving decks of aircraft carriers. And in fact, that ruggedness has stood it in very good stead because it's a real stayer. Its service life has been extended to the 1990s in maritime low-level strike roles with the RAF. And it'll be carrying the brand new Sea Eagle air-to-ship missile.
Number 12 Squadron was the first RAF squadron to be equipped with the Buccaneer in 1970, and the squadron song, Lower, Longer, Faster, seems to sum up all its qualities. No other aircraft can do all three.
From the Buccaneer to some of the very earliest in jet aircraft technology, from the 1940s this time, a pair of aircraft which look very similar to each other on the face of it, a Vampire and a Venom. The Vampire was designed as early as 1943, but it didn't actually see combat service during the Second World War. It's affectionately known as the flying wheelbarrow because of its twin tail booms. John, what's the difference between the Vampire and the Venom?
Well, the first most obvious thing to note is the Vampire T-11 is the one in the lead, and you can see the side-by-side seating. It's a training aircraft. Training along behind the Venom, a single-seater. The Venom also, in the later marks, had tip tanks as a standard fit, as you can see in this particular example. But less obviously, the Vampire was mainly of wooden construction, and the Venom went on to metal construction, which enabled the wing section to be a lot thinner, which allowed the Venom to travel at much higher Mach numbers than the Vampire.
The most obvious feature common to both aircraft is that twin boom tailplane arrangement. Now, why do the aircraft have that, John?
Well, that was one solution to the problem of keeping the tailplane out of the jet exhaust.
Both aircraft have been preserved by private enthusiasts. The Vampire is flown by Rod Dean and the Venom by Stan Hodgkins. Part of their display involves a simulated bombing run on a small cardboard cutout fort. Missed. Following the Venom and the Vampire comes the chance-bought Corsair. This goes back to a period in the 1950s when jet aircraft and propeller-driven aircraft really did fly side by side. Very distinctive shape of the Corsair there. Now the Corsair 2 is going to make a bombing run on the cutout fort. Let's see if he has better luck. And there it goes. Now, one of the distinctive features of this aircraft, John, is the cranked wing and the very big propeller. Now, why is it that odd shape?
Well, it's that odd shape to satisfy two rather contradictory requirements. First of all, you've got a very large propeller disc, which needs to have adequate ground clearance. And also, because it was a naval aircraft, it needs a very sturdy undercarriage, which means really you want a short undercarriage. That reverse gull wing satisfies both those requirements.
The Corsair bids farewell to the huge crowd here at Biggin Hill. From the huge twirling propellers of the Corsair to batons twirled by some youngsters who weren't even a gleam when Corsairs dropped their real bombs. The Cranbrook Majorettes and Youth Band.
The famous profile of the last flying Boeing B-17 bomber, the Sally B, in the very capable hands of Keith Sissons. Being harassed by a Focke-Wulf 190 on the left and a Messerschmitt 109 on the right-hand side. And coming in to the rescue, a Curtiss Kitty Hawk on the left and a Spitfire on the right.
I suppose with these precious museum pieces, it's not really practical for them to indulge in real dogfights.
Yes, they are precious museum pieces, and their pilots fly them with great care. The Focke-Wulf 190, of course, is a replica. There are no surviving examples left today.
From the same period in history come the Spitfire and the Curtiss Kitty Hawk in display. They're being flown by a father and son team. Ray Hanna, Sr., who's formerly the leader of the Red Arrows, is flying the Kitty Hawk, and his son, Mark Hanna, who's currently an RAF pilot flying Phantoms at Coningsby, is flying the Spitfire. The Hanna family team and their aircraft are part of the old Flying Machine Company based at North Weald, which is an old Battle of Britain airfield. The Curtiss P-40 Kitty Hawk was the first American mass-produced fighter. Over 13,000 were delivered to the US government alone. They're probably best remembered for their role in the desert in support of the 8th Army, and this example is in desert markings, including the distinctive shark's teeth on the nose cowling. Hannah, father and son, Ray and Mark, obviously enjoy their flying very much. What a way to spend a weekend. A nice little salute there at the end of their display to the crowd at Biggin Hill.
With up to 125,000 movements a year, Biggin Hill must rank as one of the busiest airports in Europe, providing a full customs and immigration service. There are flying schools here for the aspiring young pilot, and there's also a rapidly expanding business and executive aircraft service, as it's such an ideal gateway into Europe. Apart from all these civil activities, there's also a very important Royal Air Force presence in the shape of the Aircrew Selection Unit for all future service pilots. When I joined the RAF, I had to go through the selection process here, and I'm wondering if they still use the same old basic equipment for their aptitude tests.
Well, things have changed quite a lot, John, since those days. The old electromechanical gadgets you were using in the 1950s have now been replaced within the last year by, you guessed it, the computer. And there are all sorts of tests in this. Look at this one, for example. It's called rate control. The idea is to keep the white dot in line with the succession of red ones and not let the white dot slip off. Here's another one. Instrument interpretation. You have to scan a whole dashboard full of instruments and tell what sort of condition your aircraft is in very quickly. It's done against the clock. Here's another one. Spatial orientation. You have to be able to tell which way round the man is, even though he's upside down and back to front. Again, you have to do it very quickly. And the one they've given me to do is one which will test my coordination of hand, eye, and foot. It's not my strong point. Now, the idea behind this is that I've got to keep the red dot centered on the point where the two red lines intersect in the middle of the screen. And I have to use my rudder pedals and my control column to try and keep this blessed red dot centered on the little red square. Now, it may look easy, except that the computer has some mysterious force which is constantly trying to drag the red dot into all sorts of other places at different speeds, and I have to keep bringing it back like that to where the lines intersect. And it is astonishingly difficult. Oh, test complete. That's a merciful relief. Now, the result comes in the form of a printout, which Air Commodore John Bell has in his hand now. John, how did I do?
Not so bad as you feared there. That is a middle-of-the-road score and in the lower end of the pickable bracket. So, given one or two other things, you might be pickable, but just to be on the safe side, do you have another career option available?
Other than flying, you mean?
Yes.
I think that's a very tactful way of putting it. Thank you. What I want to know is whether Concorde Captain John Hutchinson would have done as well as I did, or as badly. What do you think, John?
No, I'm very glad I didn't have to do that. I might have suffered the indignity of failure. The Fairey Swordfish from the Royal Navy Historic Flight. In the back seat is Chief Petty Officer Ron Gawley, who's been looking after the flight's aircraft for the last 15 years, and he's retiring later this year after 40 years' service. Number 705 Naval Air Squadron is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year, and it was first equipped with the Fairey Swordfish and the Blackburn Shark.
And it can't be a coincidence that the modern 705 Naval Air Squadron's display team is called the Sharks. Their latest equipment is the Gazelle helicopter. All the pilots are instructors from the Royal Naval Air Station at Culdrose in Cornwall. They teach pilots to fly helicopters from scratch. The leader, Lieutenant Commander Nigel Hennell, and his team fly within 15 feet of each other at times, and that's only half a rotor's width. Now, although they're all Navy pilots, they have to pass through the RAF Aircrew Selection Centre here at Biggin Hill, as I did. So their hand, eye, and foot coordination must be of the highest order. To keep continuous control over the three aspects of helicopter flight takes enormous skill. Collective pitch on the rotor controls lift. The cyclic stick, rather like a control column, looks after the aircraft's attitude and forward speed, or backwards or sideways if it comes to that. And the anti-torque pedals look after the pitch of the tail rotor to control the yaw movement. So what looks like elegant ballet is actually a tour de force of concentration. One important difference between formation flying in helicopters and in fixed-wing aircraft is that a helicopter flies slightly higher than the one in front in order to avoid the downwash of the rotor.
graceful newcomer to the display scene is the Grumman Widgeon, and it's appearing for the first time on our screens. The Widgeon first appeared in 1940, and it was intended to be a 4-seat commercial transport, but it was rather overtaken by events and was adapted into use by the United States Coast Guard for anti-submarine patrols. This amphibian is flown by its owner, Michael Dunkley. It's got an interesting history in that its previous owner crashed it in a reservoir, and it had to be raised up from the water and lovingly restored. A beautiful aeroplane, the Grumman Widgeon.
It's not every day that a supermarket chain goes into aircraft production, but that's just what's happened in Cornwall. The Trago Mills SAH-1, named after the local chain of shops, is the result of the efforts of the company chairman, Mike Robertson, to revive light aircraft manufacture in Britain. Now, John, it's a pretty aircraft in my view. You're the expert. What do you think?
Well, as a generalization, it's said that if an airplane looks good, it flies good, and certainly the Trago Mills looks very good. It's very nice to see that it's a fully aerobatic aeroplane and not just semi-aerobatic, as so many of them are. And I know that the pilots who've flown her have been very impressed indeed with her handling qualities. I only hope that it's going to get the necessary funding and marketing to back the aeroplane, and I think with that hurdle overcome, it could well prove to be one of the best light trainers ever seen.
Well, it's still at the prototype stage. For the Biggin Hill display, the SAH-1 is being flown by Air Vice Marshal Geoffrey Cairns, who's had a big part to play in the development of the aircraft. The wingspan is 30 feet 8 inches, and it's powered by a 118 horsepower Lycoming engine. It just occurred to me, I wonder if we'll be seeing this little aircraft on supermarket shelves at some time in the future. The RAF Falcons free-fall parachute display team are led this year by Flight Lieutenant Derek Warby. The parachutes are high-performance ram air canopies which glide at about 20 knots rather than just going straight down like a conventional parachute. Well, parachutes and pilots don't go together under normal circumstances. In fact, there's a bit of pilot's wisdom which says don't step out of a serviceable aircraft. But there's one very brave pilot, who also happens to be a Concorde captain, who's going to do just that. But not only is it a first for him, it's also a first for Britain. John has taken off from Weston-on-the-Green with the RAF Sport Parachute Association to experience a technique called accelerated free fall. It's a brand new method of training.
Checking in.
Okay.
Checking out.
Okay.
Up, down, arch.
Whoa!
Look, reach, pull. 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. Check.
Forward left, John. Go. You have a rotating malfunction.
1 pause, 2.
John's instructors are hanging on to him to make sure he stays in the stable free fall position. A tumble at this stage could not only be very uncomfortable, it could be quite dangerous. They've now reached a speed of about 120 miles an hour. After a free fall of no less than 8,000 feet comes the time to pull the parachute. Now, what makes John's jump very special is that this is the first time in Britain anyone has used a square ram air parachute for their first jump. Normally, accelerated free-fall beginners use a conventional circular one. So pilot John has a parachute he can fly.
There we go. Looks fine, 2,000 feet. We'll do a spiral dive to the left now. One turn.
John's instructors, Sergeants Nigel Rogoff and Steve Thomas, lead the way to the white gravel landing mark. That's the target John has to aim for.
Turn to the left. Turn to the left. I'm flying now. Coming close.
Credit for these remarkable aerial pictures must go to the Chief Instructor, Flight Sergeant Steve McBride, and his fellow cameraman, Warrant Officer Joe France. And remember, this is the first time John Hutchinson has ever parachuted.
Ready for the landing now. That looks okay for the pit, I think. Right.
Keep going, John. Keep going. Keep going.
There.
Flare!
What about that? Oh, that was fantastic. That was absolutely fantastic. Oh,
Excellent.
that's the most amazing experience. It really is. It's like flying. It's the most incredible sense of freedom. I really haven't ever known anything like that. I just can't believe that this has all happened in one day. I've spent 31 years of my life avoiding jumping out of a serviceable aeroplane, and I've done it after all these years, and my only regret is that I didn't do it years ago. It's absolutely fantastic.
Now, here's a sight for Snoopy lovers. The Red Baron, Baron von Richthofen, flew a Fokker triplane in the First World War. This is a replica Fokker DR-1 built by Viv Bellamy. Although the engine is nearly original, it's a Warner Scarab radial rated at 165 horsepower from a Second World War Fairchild Argus. The dry-decker, as it was called, was unusual in that it had cantilever wings, no bracing wires. It looks fragile, but there are large wooden box spars running inside all three pairs of wings. Its great merit was that it was incredibly maneuverable. And considering the great age of the design, it first flew in 1917, the performance is remarkable. It'll do 122 miles an hour at nearly 9,000 feet. Its ceiling is 20,000 feet. Its endurance is around 2.5 hours. It's being flown here by Robin Bowes. Now, John, do you think Robin's got an easy job?
No, it's quite a tricky aeroplane to fly. For a start, with all those wings, it's a bit like looking through a Venetian blind when you're coming into land. It's also interesting to note, in an age of all-moving tailplanes, that the triplane boasts an all-moving fin, which contributed to its agility in combat, but again, it made it quite a handful for its pilots.
Including the Red Baron, I don't doubt, the Fokker triplane. Well, from Baron power to the massive power of the McDonnell Douglas F-15 Eagle. There's enough power there to lift no less than 40 triplanes straight up off the ground if it wanted to. Those engines, Pratt & Whitney turbofans, can put out 22 metric tons of thrust. It's being flown here by Major Dean Gordon. John, what's the F-15's role?
Well, there are many versions. There's an air superiority fighter. Other versions include an all-weather strike aircraft, and also they're talking about developing a short takeoff and landing version of the F-15.
It has that unusual twin tail. What's the purpose of that?
That's simply to give it improved directional stability. Good view of the variable geometry intakes, so similar to those seen in Concorde.
For a lot of people, the real pleasure in an airfare like this is the noise and excitement of the fast jets, but there's another small coterie for whom the only way to travel is by balloon. This is the British Airways hot air balloon Concorde, piloted by Concorde flight engineer Tony Brown. One of Tony's colleagues, and one of mine if it comes to that, John Hutchinson, is at this moment about 13,000 feet above the clouds.
Yes, Chris, you certainly are joining me on a very special occasion. As you can see, I'm airborne again on a Concorde, doing my part-time job. Only this time, it's not just one Concorde, it's one aeroplane in a formation of 4 Concordes. We're in the number 4 aircraft, and in the left-hand seat in command is the Fleet Manager Technical of the British Airways Concorde Division, Captain Dave Leaney. Obviously, this is the first time that Concordes have flown in formation with other Concordes. Almost certainly it'll be the last time. Dave, I'm wondering if you're having any particular problems maintaining formation.
No, once we're settled, it looks very nice, and it becomes easier as the minutes go by, John. It looks beautiful from here. Okay, coming port now, 20 degrees back. And the leader's leveling at 130 today.
Dave, I think a lot of people must be wondering after all these years how much further life Concorde has. How do you actually see the future for this airplane in the next 10 years?
Well, the future, I think, is assured. For at least 10 years, more than likely to the end of the century, John. It's getting better and better all the time.
Dave, you're making it look so easy that you're really making me itch to get my hands on the controls. Do you think I could just have a little go at flying formation myself?
Yes, of course, John. You have control.
I have control.
We're just catching up a little bit.
I've got that. I'm just throttling back a bit to slow it down to maintain our station. Gosh, it's absolutely fantastic, this. It really is. It takes me back to being in the Air Force and flying formation in the Air Force. It really isn't as difficult as perhaps one would think it might be. Am I doing all right at the moment, Dave?
Beautiful, yes. Looks superb.
Well, it's certainly a fantastic success story. And Dave, I'd like to thank you for letting me have a go at this. I'm sure you're itching to get your hands back on the controls again. So can I thank you very much and hand over to you? You have control?
I have control, John. Concorde formation on our mark. Brake. Now. Leader braking. 2 braking.
Incredible. 3 braking.
4 braking.
What an extraordinary sight. 4 Concordes in formation and behaving more like fighter aircraft than luxury passenger transports. But if the ticket for Concorde is beyond your means, there's another way of getting off the ground. And you could do it in your own plane. You could do it in a microlight. Running an aircraft in the microlight category does have the advantage that it makes it very cheap to run. And that's the factor that's making it increasingly attractive to commercial users, like farmers, for example, or the police who might want to use them for surveillance. And look at this experiment with British Aerospace. The pod underneath this shadow is an infrared detector, and they're experimenting with it now, and it could have a spin-off for military applications in the future. The irony, of course, is that the aircraft on its own costs around £11,000, and the surveillance pod underneath costs a staggering £100,000. From the sublime to the ridiculous. John, you've flown the Shadow. What did you make of it?
I was very impressed with its safety above all else. It's virtually impossible to stall it. It doesn't really stall at all. It mushes gently down, and it's quite impossible to spin it.
I suppose the big economic advantage behind the microlight is the CAA rules, which mean that provided the aircraft is under a certain weight and wing area and wing loading and so on, you have all sorts of advantages, like, for example, the fact that to qualify for a private pilot's license in this category, you have to do about half the number of hours you have to do for a conventional light aircraft.
Yes, that's true, and the CFM Shadow is the brainchild of David Cook, and their factory is based in East Anglia. The Quickie 2 is America's best-selling home-built kit, and it's capable of cruising at 170 miles an hour. And its faster brother, the Quickie 200, can fly at more than 200 miles an hour. 21 gallons of fuel will take you more than 1,000 miles, nearly 50 miles to the gallon. Over 1,500 kits have been sold, and it takes about 1,000 hours to assemble one.
The Fournier duo really do make flying look like ballet. They prove you don't need lots of noise and speed to produce a really effective aerobatic display. For the first time this year, one of the two Fournier RF4 motor gliders is being flown by a woman, Tizzy Hodson.
First of all, Tizzy, congratulations. It's very nice to see a lady pilot encroaching on a traditionally male preserve. How are you enjoying it all?
Oh, loving it to pieces. It's the best job I've ever had, that's for sure.
And how long have you been with the team now?
Well, this is my first season with the Unipart team. After 9 years of flying, this is certainly the ultimate of any job I could envisage myself in, and hopefully it won't be my last term with them.
Last year you were using smoke, this year you're not at the moment. Can you give me an answer for that?
Well, unfortunately we've had a technical hitch with the paperwork from CAA and the rest, but we're hoping very shortly to have it underway and in the airplanes again.
And as far as the routine you go through, what's the most interesting part of the act?
Well, the most interesting part would be the mirror. That's where we have the top pilot, John Taylor, flies inverted, and I keep place underneath him. And because we're the only team to fly the mirror without an inverted system, the top pilot must fly with the engine off in a gliding position.
Coming from the 81st Tactical Fighter Wing at RAF Bentwaters is the Fairchild A-10 Thunderbolt. Although it's not the prettiest of airplanes, it carries a potent punch. Its primary function is ground attack, and any tanks that get in the way of its 7-barrel, 4,000 rounds per minute cannon will certainly know it's been hit. Has exceptional strength and performs well at low altitudes with a large payload. With the very latest avionics, it's capable of reaching its target, even through intensive anti-aircraft fire. The airplane is able to still fly, having taken much battle damage, the pilot being protected by sitting in a titanium bathtub. Notice the high-mounted engines to give them protection from ground fire. The Fairchild Republic A-10.
One of the many attractions for the visitors to Biggin Hill is the chance to take a joyride in the venerable DC-3 of Air Atlantique. For a tenner a trip, it's a real bit of instant Casablanca. But these aircraft are still flown commercially in this country. Well, the Biggin Hill Airfair has been graced with the presence of the Minister for Aviation, Michael Spicer. Welcome, Michael. In the shadow of one of the great historic aircraft of all time, the Lancaster bomber. Does your memory of aviation go back this far?
No, my memory doesn't go quite this far, but it certainly goes back to Dakotas, and my first memory is of flying out of Africa on a Dakota with lots of paper bags and people being sick into them, and then eating boiled sweets and being sick again. Seemed to be what flying was all about in those days.
Let me ask you, since we're on the subject of holidays, deregulation has been in the news recently, the reduction in airfares. Now, a reduction has already taken place, but can you see any more coming in the near future?
Yes, I can. I think that fares, well, certainly they're due to come down in Europe. There's no question about it. They're far too high. you can still fly more cheaply across the Atlantic than you can, for instance, from this country to Nice, and that isn't very good for holidays. So, yes, we must bring airfares down. There's more competition between airlines, and I think we're on track for that.
It is going to be an uphill struggle because there are a lot of vested interests in Europe for keeping airfares the way they are now.
Tremendous amount of vested interests, as you say, and countries that don't agree with it and want to protect their airlines. I think very unwisely, because in the long term, the interest of the passenger is also the interest of the airline, and more passengers flying on aeroplanes is good for airline business.
Well, more power to your elbow, Michael Spicer. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And here's the same venerable Lancaster in the air, in formation with a Hurricane fighter, which must be feeling a bit left out with all the Spitfire celebrations going on this year. This is the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight, minus its usual Spitfire, because obviously it's very well represented elsewhere. The flight was formed in 1957 to commemorate the RAF's finest hour. The Lancaster is the only airworthy example in the world. The Hurricane was the last one ever built. The Lancaster bomber is the last flying survivor of 7,377 which were built during the war. It's in the colours of 101 Squadron, which got involved in electronic countermeasures during the war. The Hurricane is already a star, having appeared in Angels 1-5, Reach for the Sky, and The One That Got Away. It's currently carrying the colour scheme of 8-5 Squadron, which used to specialise in night fighter operations.
Aerotriga is the Hungarian national aerobatic team. They were formed in 1977, and its members are pilots of the air service of the Hungarian Ministry of Agriculture. They're flying the excellent Zlin 50, an all-metal aerobatic aeroplane made in Czechoslovakia with operational G limitations of plus or minus 9G.
I must say, having flown as a passenger with the Harvard formation team, I now see these flying skills in a whole new light and with a whole new respect. This formation flying is extraordinary.
It's an impeccable display, and I think one of the unique features, certainly as far as I know, is the amount of negative G formation aerobatics that they put into their act. Negative G, incidentally, is quite an uncomfortable sensation. All the blood's forced from your toes up into the top of your head, and it can actually cause a pilot to red out. Watch out for those maneuvers later on. As they push up now into a bunting loop, they're experiencing an awful lot of negative G. I'd much rather them than me. National team, Aerotriga.
If the thought of all those aerobatics makes you feel a bit queasy, save some sympathy for the customers nearer the ground, taking some very unsettling rides. This is altogether more gentle. The beautiful Hornet moth made by de Havilland's in the 1930s. It was designed as a luxury touring aircraft with leather seats, a walnut dashboard and sun blinds. The price then was £875, which in real terms, I suppose, is not much different from the price of a luxury four-seater aircraft today. Another luxury feature was folding wings. Just take out 4 pins from the leading edges of the wings and they fold back against the fuselage. This Hornet moth is being flown by Ian Dalziel. Another bit of 1930s preservation, a commercial stablemate to the Hornet moth, is the de Havilland Fox moth, DH-83. The four-seater passenger cabin is below and in front of the pilot's cockpit. 98 of these were built, mainly for air taxi operators, small airlines and bush pilots. The present owner of this aircraft, John Lurie, says it's the last Fox moth flying commercially. He should know he still uses it for popular joyriding.
Moving backwards down the runway at about 45 miles an hour, an RAF Harrier. The limitation in backwards flight is really a rudder limit. Any faster and you could get rudder tramping, which of course would lead to severe control problems. The Harrier today is flown by Flight Lieutenant Ray Coates from number 233 Operational Conversion Unit, based at Royal Air Force Wittering, and he's coming in for a touch-and-go landing of the short landing and takeoff variety. Pulling up now into what to me looks like an extremely steep climb. I should estimate that at being as 50 degrees at least. Most impressive. An interesting possible development with Harrier is Skyhook. It's basically a crane mounted on a ship of some sort, and it's capable of capturing a Harrier in the hover and placing it on or below deck. The lock-on mechanism is space stabilized, and that allows the ship considerable sea motion, but provides a nice stable platform for the Harrier pilot to lock onto. The inlets around the air intakes are auxiliary air inlets, and their function is to provide a greater mass flow of air through the engine when it's operating at high power, at slow speed, or in the hover. Ray Coates bowing now to say his farewell to the huge crowd here at Biggin Hill, and he leaves us, as he started his display, going out backwards.
The wartime Dakota in its civilian DC-3 colours makes a fitting foreground to a 50th birthday flypast of Spitfires. One of them has its civil registration, G-Fire. The rest are in their original military paint schemes. What a fantastic sight. And what a tribute to this great aircraft. 6 Spitfires in the air at the same time.
The sound you can hear above me, the sound of the Merlin engines of the Spitfire, and lined up behind me a collection of Spitfires assembled here at Biggin Hill to celebrate 50 glorious years. And these beautiful, sleek aeroplanes are attracting a huge crowd of photographers. The design of the Spitfire, of course, owes such a lot to those thoroughbred supermarine racing seaplanes which won the Schneider Trophy outright in 1931.
it first came into service, of course, it was the fastest aeroplane anywhere in the world, and that in itself appeals to the average fighter pilot. And then it was a marvelous aeroplane to handle. It was a very safe aeroplane.
Well, the Spitfire was the most marvelous airplane that you could ever be able to fly. It was, without a doubt, my favorite airplane. It was part of you. It was almost psychic. It knew what you wanted it to do before you did it. It was light on controls. It was maneuverable. It outclassed, outflew every airplane that it came up against.
I suppose the hairiest moment was being shot down. I was shot down at the end of the Battle of Britain, about 25,000 feet. Looking back, you know, fear is like pain. You can't remember it when you look back. And so I don't remember that as being too desperate now. Well, I'm sure I did think so at the time.
The people we admired were the people on the ground who were being knocked to bits by the German bombers. And I think if there was any heroism, it was to stop them from doing it. I think all you can say is it was the greatest aeroplane of its time, and it has survived when all other aeroplanes have been forgotten.
From the Second World War's fastest fighter to the first RAF fighter capable of sustained supersonic flight, the Lightning. It's still serving after 27 years.
It was designed by Teddy Petter, who had already designed the Canberra, which of course is also still serving in the Royal Air Force, and he then went on to design the Gnat, the first aircraft used by the Red Arrows. The black probe you can see just on the left-hand side of the fuselage is the in-flight refueling probe. The Lightning's capable of flying at 1,500 miles an hour, and it's powered by two Rolls-Royce Avon engines. The fuselage contains those engines, and the fuel is carried in those highly swept wings. And now for the technology of the 21st century, the experimental aircraft project. This airplane rolled out at the British Aerospace factory at Warton in April, and it really is state-of-the-art. It's a technology demonstrator which should provide invaluable knowledge for the multinational European fighter aircraft, and it encompasses all the latest developments. Pitch control is achieved by the Canard foreplane, and the carbon fiber mission adaptive wing allows for controlled shaping under load during maneuver, and combined with the computer controlled full span, leading edge and trailing edge flaps, it makes it almost a variable camber wing.
Since this time last year, we've had thousands of letters asking to see one picture from last year's holiday air. The unique formation of Concorde, the Red Arrows and the QE2. How could we refuse? And the Red Arrows are back again this year, as popular as ever. The results of full-time professional aerobatics training under the team leadership of squadron leader Richard Thomas are as spectacular as ever. The synchro pair are flown this year by Flight Lieutenants Tony Lunnon-Wood and Charlie McElroy. The RAF Red Arrows 1986.
Coming off a bit. Pulling up. No problem. Down. No problem. tightening. 9 hours, 8, 9. Stop. Infrared, coming out. Check. 4, 5. And in. And on. And in. Push threshold. Look off, go. And. Go. 4, 5. Go. 4, 5. And in. Letting it out. Right, start. Start. And crash right one.
And the breathtaking red arrows are the grand finale of Holiday Air 86. I'm sure everyone will have a special moment from this galaxy of aviation. The highlight for me was the tremendous gathering of Spitfires this year, especially the all-too-brief ride I was allowed in Nick Grace's two-seater. Unforgettable.
And I'll never forget that parachute jump for giving me the experience of the whole range of emotions, from terror to utter exhilaration.
I can well imagine. From Holiday Air and from John and me, goodbye.